out whether or not they're having intentions. And what about people who are being radicalised in this country? I mean, there's quite a few questions here or comments about the Manchester. How do we protect our children? What do we do about the threat of terrorism? And are there any particular things that you can offer from your particular perspective about dealing with that particular issue? Leaving aside whether or not it's connected with the amount of people coming into the country, but terrorism is a real threat, and I'd be keen to know, I'm sure everybody else will be keen to know the questions. Do you have any particular comments about combating so-called Islamic State and all other terrorists?
Thank you. One of the things that we've been hearing about is really the numbers of police and really the funding for because the counterintelligence or rather the counter-terrorism police is hugely important, particularly when we need to identify who these characters are. We have people wandering around the streets that have been identified, that are known to the authorities, and yet we just don't have the resources to follow that through. And this assault upon the people who want to protect us is something that we were not going to stand for at all, because the result is going to be that a couple of people do get missed, and we end up with the tragedies that we're having to see. Now, excuse me. So we certainly need to be focusing upon our police numbers. Not only that, we want to be making sure that our impact fund is being properly financed as well. And what that means is that the people that are arriving to this country that have issues when they do settle down are being integrated properly, that they do understand how positive contribution to our society should look like. So these are the areas that we really need to be focused upon. But cuts to public service are just not going to be helpful at all.
Switch direction occasionally. So Brian, would you comment? And we've had several questions about police and about cuts to the police, so that might be worth bringing in what you feel about that as well.
Okay, right. And it's been terrible what's happened in Manchester, and full credit to our emergency services for responding so quickly. But there's a number of issues here, and I'm deeply frustrated that we have seen such large cuts of police officers. 20,000 have left our streets, which is why the Labour Party has said we will reinstate 10,000 officers. It's why we're frustrated when I get emails from residents who are saying that they're on the phone for 30 minutes to the police, they can't get through. And we know that there has been privatisation, and we know there have been cuts to back office staff. We know that you can't go to Langton Station anymore because it's been closed to the public. This is really difficult for us. We need more police officers, and I don't think putting the army on the streets is a sign of strength. I think it's a sign of weakness. Because where are the officers that we had? Where are the officers who should have been on the streets protecting us? Because they've been cut. That's the problem. And we need to get more police officers on the streets. And we need to invest in our security service. And we need more firefighters. The people who protect us and look after our communities have been cut. And that's what we need to focus on. But even if we do get those officers back, it's more than that. Because we need our community policing back. We need people who are out there in the communities talking to people, who understand their communities, who are not dashing between incidents because there's not enough time. What we need are people who understand those communities and can work with those communities and understand where there are problems. And we need to integrate people into our society. And we need to work with our youth groups. And we need to expand youth provisions so that actually people do have somewhere to go and integrate. Because at the moment, that's not happening. And those are critical issues for us. And yes, you have to be firm and you have to have strong security forces so that when an atrocity is planned, then it is found and it is stopped, because that is just awful. And what we saw in Manchester just cannot be allowed to happen. But it's not just about that final stage, it's about how we treat our communities at every step of the way. And it's about how we protect our communities and it's about how we work with our communities.
And with all due respect to Byron, that magic money tree, I wish I knew where it was. Because you need to pay for all these things. There is no money other than what is raised through taxation and through business activity. And you can raid the economy once. You can take us back to the highest levels of taxation in peacetime, back to 1945, take that money out of the economy, spend it on the things that you want to spend it now, but the danger is you only ever do it once, because you stifle economic activity, you stifle the growth that would come from our economy that will continue to pay for services beyond that. Yes, it's difficult. I don't want to be sitting here saying we don't have enough money to fund everything that we would like to. But that's the reality check that we have to be involved with. I stood in my first election when I was 8 years old. It was the 3-day week, and it was miners' strikes and power cuts and all sorts. And I was the Conservative candidate. My father had just started his business, and I stood up and talked about those problems. Next to me was the Liberal promising longer holidays and longer break time. The other was promising free sweets. Guess what? I didn't win that election because I was the one being the grown-up there. We have to actually pay for the services that we want. Now, yes, we can do that through taxation, but don't pretend for a minute you can just take money out of the economy and it will have no impact. I also think it's very dangerous to link police numbers with terrorism. They are two separate issues. Now, I'll talk about the police numbers and police funding, and I'm very pleased that we have a Essex Police and Crime Commissioner who has developed a new plan with the Chief Constable, and he's starting to increase the number of officers in Essex, as well as doubling the number of special constables as well. He's also raising additional funding. We pay for that through our council tax. But unfortunately, historically, Essex is one of the lowest funded police services in the country because we've always been very efficient. And we are in the bottom 25%, and we need to get out of that. We need to find a way of increasing funding, and I will work with the Police and Crime Commissioner to do that. Because we all want to see police on the streets. But we also have to recognise that crime in itself has changed as well. But actually, there are a whole variety of crimes that we may never see that have a huge impact on people. I see when they come to me, desperate, who have been conned out of not a few quid, tens of thousands, their entire life savings, not through greed, through thinking they were doing something good to help wider society. And so that is a crime that we also need to work on. I recognise that the 101 service is a challenge at the moment, but I'm very pleased that there is investment being made in that, there's investment being made in new technology, and already 13% of contact with the police is being done through the online portal, so that's a good thing as well. But yes, we've got to get policing right, we do have to pay for it. Now, with regards to terrorism, I think we should be incredibly proud of the intelligence services that we have in this country. I think they are probably, if not the best, certainly amongst the top. GCHQ and all that they do, I think, is incredible, and to keep us so safe. I know that the tragedy in Manchester has shocked us all, but what has, I hope, reassured us all is the number of times that the intelligence services have foiled attacks upon us. And we have to get this into perspective. The people who are conducting these attacks are warped, distorted, misguided, misled individuals who do not speak for anyone else other than ISIS, Daesh. Why we can't call them Daesh, I don't know. They distort a perfectly peaceful religion for their own political aims. And we have to find a way of combating that. But there is no simple way of doing that. Integration, I think, is key. I think we need to find better ways of engaging with the Muslim community, because it is predominantly Muslims who are engaged in this and those who convert. I don't think it's anything to do with immigration, because a lot of these people are homegrown. We need to break down the barriers between the communities, the security forces, and those who are in danger of being radicalised.
Our security service were warned about that now.
Well, we're not quite sure. They're actually doing, well, with all due respect, they are actually saying that's not true.
By a mosque that supports Al-Qaeda.
5 times they were warned and they ignored the community.
Well, okay,
That's not true.
we will have...
That's true, that's the truth.
It's not true.
Fine. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, that's true. That would be the form of an inquiry. I think they are actually disputing that. But anyway, the point is, lessons are always learned from these events. But I mean, I'm not sure anyone in here has the actual solution, other than it is better training to understand the science, better integration of communities and breaking down the barriers of those who would see the radicalisation taking place and then feeling enabled to come and talk to the security services, to the police. That's the way we can combat this. There is no simple solution, but I think one thing we do have to do is continue to be completely vigilant.
This fits in.
Sorry, can we move from Peter? We haven't spoken on the subject yet.
I'm asking Steve to speak and then I'm going to ask people to speak. I'm just working in a different
We'll try and get a chance for everyone to answer each other's points, just mixing around a little bit. It fits in very well with the question about racism. I apologise to that person for not answering it properly before. The key for me to ending these terrorist attacks in our country is not only bobbies on the beat, not only police on the streets, but it's also building integration and building relationships within poorer communities, Muslim community. You're trying to hear me, sir? Sorry. Building relationships and building with communities to meet these people, and it's not only put a good face on authorities, put a good face on the police force, on even just white faces, to put a good reputation on that, but also to gain information and gain intelligence from the ground, from people on the ground that know these people who are struggling, who maybe have looked into these websites, looked into this information, and maybe thinking about turning. We need to be there to catch these people, not just from a criminal aspect, but also from a social aspect. Before they slip into that, these people are often depressed. They're often friendless. They're often apart from society. If we bring them into society and welcome them into society before they can be tempted away into anything else, that is how we stop terrorism. By reopening youth groups, by having police on the streets, by working with charities, so that we can meet these people before they turn to do something nasty. Very short piece. One more point, if I could be. Another way to combat terrorism is to make terrorism not look strong. A very good way to do that is to not sell weapons to Saudi Arabia.
Peter, your comment, and also trying to draw us back a bit to funding, because obviously that comes into it when it comes to police.
Yes, well, on that particular point, on the funding point, of course, it is extraordinary. When you look at the Prime Minister, when she was Home Secretary, whatever, consistently cut the police right to the bone to 20,000 long. How many police stations? There's one opposite us here. It's closed. Right? Closing,
Would you restore?
closing all the time. What we would do in my party is have 20,000 new policemen as a matter of absolute urgency. And for that matter, 20,000 new members of our armed forces, because also that's about security, and our armed forces are now the smallest they've ever been since 1815. They can actually fit into Wembley Stadium and still have 10,000 seats free. Did you know that? So basically, this is what supposedly conservative government has done. Right? So this is crucial. But what I would say is that there's no point anymore in these platitudes that we've heard even tonight, I'm afraid. The fact is that these terrorists, right, they're not, I don't care whether they're depressed actually, I don't care whether they're lonely. I've been depressed and lonely in my life. We all have. That is not the reason to actually go out and then slaughter people, blow them to bits with bombs. Right? This is becoming the new normal, whether we like it or not. Right? This is a terrible thing, but we are gradually, unfortunately, getting used to it because it's going to happen more and more. There are 23,000 jihadists. This is the Times. It's not me. This was the Times last week. Who've either been under surveillance at some time or are indeed under surveillance now. Do you know it takes about 20 people in the intelligence services to monitor one person? Right? We are stretched to capacity. I would like to see MI5 at least doubled in size, because that is the sheer scale of the problem that we are talking about. Secondly, I would say that under no circumstances, anybody who has gone out of the country, like this guy who did the thing in Manchester did, and come back in again, how that happened, I do not know. It shows extraordinary weakness. Anyone who does that should not be allowed back into the country, and they should have their citizenship revoked, their passport taken away. Right? No country that wants to survive behaves in the way that we're doing at the moment with this. Right? We have to be quite clear about it. There's no point in looking for excuses or whatever. It's nothing to do with poverty. Many of the terrorists have actually been professional people, going right back to 9/11 or whatever. We have to know what the enemy is. In this particular case, it's worth saying this. With the IRA in the 1970s, I grew up with the bombs in London in the 1970s, like I'm sure you all did. The fact is that there was, whether you agreed with it or not, whether you thought it was terrible or not, there was a kind of political point that they had. They wanted to unite an island, right? You might have disagreed or agreed or whatever. Terrorism was, of course, wrong. This is different. These people hate what we actually are. There is no negotiating to do with them. There's no speaking to do with them. They have to be wiped out. It's as simple as that. When it comes to homegrown terrorism of the sort we've seen, whether it was 7/7, they were homegrown, or indeed the most recent one in Manchester, homegrown terrorism. The fact is that what I believe firmly is when you talk about integration, we're hearing the word integration a lot, right? It's new that you hear this word now. I ask you to think of this. It's new that you hear this word. For years it was multiculturalism. Multiculturalism isn't just about enjoying other people's cooking and clothes and cultural symptoms and things like that. It was a policy, a public policy, which basically led to people having separate communities. For a long time, you weren't even expected to learn the language. Now, once you were called a fascist, right, for asking people to learn the language. Now every party pretty much thinks, actually, that you should learn the language if you're going to be integrated. I firmly believe in integration. Multiculturalism has separated people. I believe in a multi-ethnic society which is joined under a sense of allegiance to Britain and a British identity. There can be nothing healthier than that. It can be done. It can be harmonious. But we've got to change the whole way that we have looked at the way that we have done these things. In the meantime, it is the absolute first function of a government to keep its people safe. The idea that people could go in and out of a country, not monitored, and then go about their way and then maybe be tagged. We have used one exclusion order, one of these exclusion orders. That's all we have used. We've got to wake up to this. There's no point anymore in somehow or other just simply saying our emergency services are great. We know they are. We've actually got to deal with these problems head on and being honest with ourselves.
I'm going to move us on to some more local. I'm increasingly aware of the fact that we struggle in our society today to be able to say that we think something is wrong. If you stand up and say, whatever the particular issue, if you stand up and say something is wrong, you're often accused of being intolerant or, bad because you're not.
You're not allowed to say it. Look at Katie Hopkins.
Well, I'm just gently trying to say that we should be allowed to but we can say that we think something is right and something is wrong. We live in a very much no-blame culture these days, and I think sometimes it would help us to think more about matters that are right and wrong. And the other comment I just want to make, and I'm sure we'll come back to this in the questions, is that all of the statements that have been made are fair enough, but of course, with all the promises, they need to be funded, and we still need to remember that somewhere down the line, we need to think about where the money is going to come from.
But it can be funded. It can be funded. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's a matter of priorities.
Yes.
If you can fund an army to go off to Iraq, or if you can also, for that matter, build up and hold up banks that have gone bust,
Peter,
you can get money. You
to
can
make
get
a
money.
promise, to make a promise that said we'll put 20,000 more policemen back on the streets.
Yes, we will find it. I tell you how we'll find it. I'll tell you right now. We will cancel this stupid train of 80 billion called HS2.
In a minute, but if I could just come on to housing as a particular